Welcome to Americana Archives. Today we have part 1 of the story with the headline, Underground Railroad Reminiscences. This article was written by H.E. Nottingham. The introduction says, some years ago, Dr. F.W. Shepherdson established 2 prizes of $50 and $25 each for the best essays in American history in connection with the History Department of Denison University. Last year the subjects chosen were of local interest. 2 of the essays written were of such a nature that it was thought the people of Granville would appreciate having them published in the Granville Times, where they would be accessible to all. The one year submitted won the first prize in last year's contest. It says, the Underground Railroad for 50 years or more was a method of secretly conducting slaves from the South to places of security in the free states in Canada. The great secrecy required for this enterprise makes it very difficult to secure detailed facts concerning the methods and business done. There are several very comprehensive books which set forth the importance of the so-called Underground Railroad. The best of these is perhaps Seibert's The Underground Railroad. The purpose of this paper is merely to relate a few of the many episodes which took place along some branch of that great system, which was not a thoroughly organized business, but nevertheless the results of its work would indicate that it were. It was the intention of the writer at first to give only those incidents which occurred in and around Granville. But in the search for local experiences, he ran across a few outside happenings which will perchance be interesting to others. Had the same effort been put forth a few years ago, many more interesting facts concerning the work of the Underground Railroad in Granville could have been obtained. Now most of those who were best qualified to give those facts have passed away. Let us first recall a few things about this so-called underground versions as to how the term originated. Of course the same is figurative, but very apt. The incident that probably led to the naming of the road occurred in Ohio, which was favorably located for Underground Railroad adventures. Mr. Rushar Sloan of Sandusky, Ohio, a prominent assistant of the fugitives, says that the term originated in the following way. A runaway, Tice Davids by name, who settled near Sandusky, in his flight came to the old Ohio River near Ripley where he crossed. There his Kentuckian master was in close pursuit as the fugitive plunged into the river and swam across. His master and his aides spent some time in securing a skiff, and when they did get across, failed to get track of the runaway. After a long search, the disappointed master declared, that slave must have gone off on an underground road. Tice had been spirited away over the hills to Brown County and on from station to station till he arrived at Sandusky. The incident made such a good story that the abolitionists adopted the name Underground Railroad. Few historians seem to consider the Underground Railroad of any importance in the anti-slavery movement, but the fact that there were probably over 40,000 fugitives aided in Ohio alone between 1830 and 1860 must have kept the sympathy of the abolitionists keyed up to the highest pitch. The hardship that the runaways were willing to undergo and the stories they related to their benefactors could do nothing less than make the anti-slavery element more zealous in their efforts for the unfortunate people. It may seem absurd to say that this system performed a real service to the South, but a few at least do hold this view. It is well known that many slaves who thought that they could bear the yoke of bondage no longer found relief by means of the Underground Railroad, and that there were leaders among these people is shown by the work which they did after their escape. Probably this system saved the South from many a servile insurrection. Had such characters as Joshua Henson, J.W. Logan, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, William Still, William Wells Brown, and Henry Bibb not found relief or vent for their passions for freedom by means of the Underground Railroad, perhaps the South would have witnessed scenes similar to those in San Domingo during the years 1791 to 1793, or the famous uprising of 1800, 1820, and 1831 in South Carolina and Virginia. Another effect of Underground Railroad operations steadily carrying off the Southerners' property was to exasperate the slaveholder and make him more radical in his demand for the capture and return of the fugitive, thus causing the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 and the personal liberty laws in the northern states. Since the abolitionists were the most active in the rescue of the slave from bondage, it may be well to give a brief account of their struggles in Granville. The Anti-Slavery Society was formed in Philadelphia in 1833. The following year, a branch of the society was started in Granville. It was not at all popular at first and met with great opposition. But what the society lacked in quantity, it made up in quality. it contained some giants, not only physically but intellectually. One reason why the movement was not popular was because there was a strong feeling in the colonization plan. The following article was given by Mr. Theophilus Little of Kansas City, Kansas, in a letter to the Granville Times of March 31st, 1910. During the Underground Railway days, there were really two anti-slavery elements or parties: abolitionists, which part did not want the slaves sent to Liberia, and colonization, which wished the blacks to be freed but colonized in Liberia. One Saturday night, an abolition meeting was held in the conference room, which was the basement of the old academy. Some great speaker was to address the meeting, and it was surely a hot time in town tonight. The idea of shaving the tails of the horses that were hitched around or near the place of meeting was conceived as a brilliant project, and many horses were thus treated. Of course, among them, Big Yellow Mike, the engine that hauled the midnight trains of Underground Railroad for Uncle Joe Little, to whom it was a badge of honor. Deacon Rose, Uncle Tim, was an ardent colonizationist, but had the curiosity to attend this abolition meeting, and like Uncle Roswell Graves, he had the one bob-tailed old mare, Old Doll. I never saw him drive two horses, always worked oxen. This meeting was held Saturday night. The deacon was early to bed, early to rise, so early Sunday morning found him at the stable. Old Doll's tail was shaved, smack smooth. Now the deacon never swore. I don't believe he did then. I think he just whistled, but not a sacred tune. My father did not attend the meeting. Our horses were in the pasture with the calves that night. Those calves chewed all the hair of the horses' tails that night. No, father never swore either. Would not have believed it if I heard him, but I didn't hear him. He was wonderfully proud of his horses. I think the recording angel would have said, "Well, I can't find any pen. There's no ink either. Don't believe any such thing anyhow." But Old Doll and Mr. Little's horses had to go to church that Sunday morning, just as usual. But Uncle Tim Rose didn't go to any more abolition meetings, at least until that April morning that Fort Sumter was fired upon. The hustle of that shot made millions of abolitionists and free men of 4 millions more. Henry L. Richards, in a letter to the Times of August 1st, 1901, says that the first lecture on the slave question was against the colonization plan. The lecture was delivered by Mr. Hawley of Western Reserve College. This address stirred up quite a commotion among the colonizationists. He then tells about excitement produced by the lectures of Mr. Theodore Weld. In seeking for material concerning the Underground Railroad, the writer was fortunate enough to come upon a paper which had been written by Dr. Lewis Barnes of Columbus and presented to Captain Joseph Scott for safekeeping. It is entitled Omens of a New Age, or Things Seen and Heard. The paper gives a very interesting account of Mr. Weld's life and work in Lane Seminary and his lectures in and about Granville. It was written with a pencil many years ago. It took the assistance of a magnifying glass to make out parts of it, but perhaps it will afford enough pleasure to those who will take time to read it to pay for all the effort expended. One copy of it will be attached to this manuscript, and the original and a copy will be returned to Captain Scott. This Theodore Weld must have been a very powerful orator, as is shown in the article referred to above. The same is brought out in Mr. Richards' account of him and all other descriptions of that young champion of the unfortunate slave. His first lecture was in the Congregational Conference Room. Mr. F.W. Shepherdson, in a letter to the Granville Times, gives the date of this lecture as April 3rd, 1835. But the orator was not allowed to speak in peace. An excited mob gathered around the building and assailed the speaker and the audience with characteristic arguments which were more effective in soiling the garments of the ladies than in convincing the understanding of the audience. It was at this meeting, or one similar, that Sam White from the Welsh Hills went out and scattered the disturbers single-handed. This encounter described in Dr. Barnes' Omens of a New Age, or Things Seen and Heard. This Sam White was the first student to enter Granville College. He became a very eloquent speaker and ardent worker in the anti-slavery cause. His prominence will be noticed later. Another lecture was given by Mr. Weld in the unfinished building of Deacon Leonard Bushnell. The leader of the mob was quieted by a stalwart man from Jersey City, who politely took the disturber by the collar and threw him over the fence and told him that no disturbance would be tolerated there that night. After this lecture, the authorities of the town forbade any further anti-slavery meeting within the town limits. Then Mr. Ashley Bancroft, who lived in the first house on the west side of the road, just around the College Hill on North Pearl Street, offered his place for the third meeting. The mob reserved their attack till the abolitionists returned to town. Then one of them attacked Sam White, who soon told him a lesson he was not likely to forget very soon. To be continued. Check back soon for the next installment of this incredible story. This story came from the great state of Ohio, being reported in the Granville Times of January 4th, 1912. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.